Welcome to Real Change, the movie review podcast hosted by Brian. View this podcast every Thursday as I will have a new review each week. This podcast contains detailed plot descriptions, spoilers, and harsh language. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Real Change, Episode 4. My name is Brian, and today we'll be discussing Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, starring Donald Pleasence and Danielle Harris, directed by Dwight Little. This one I actually saw in the theater back in the day. I was a little too young to go see it, but I got into the theater anyway. I remember I saw it in November, so maybe that's why they didn't care. They were just trying to wring the last bit of money out of it. But I went in there, and I went all rebel afterwards and snuck into another movie after Halloween 4, because that's what teenagers do. Unfortunately, that movie was U2, the band U2, Rattle and Hum. And it wasn't very good, and it was really preachy, and it didn't hold my teenage attention, but I stayed for the whole thing because I thought, well, I snuck in here, now I might as well just stay, because, so I stayed for the whole thing because that's my teenage pride sticking up for me and just getting crazy. So a little backstory on this one. After Halloween 3, producer Moustapha Akkad, he wanted to go back to Michael Myers. He was trying to get them. He had Cannon Films. If anyone knows anything about film history, Cannon Films is probably not a company you want to go to. They did everything really cheap and really, it was mostly gore and TNA, which is good for a horror movie, but they usually had budgets where if they say, oh, here's 8 mil, by the time your movie started, it was down to 1 mil. So that's a company you don't really want to work with. So they approached John Carpenter and Deborah Hill again, and they were told they have to work in Michael Myers' character. Carpenter still wasn't too interested in that, so his idea was to bring it back to Haddonfield and show a town that was haunted by the first 2 films, the events that happened there, and to basically show what happens when a town goes through trauma like that. And I think some version of Michael shows up, or the evil that he represents, but it wasn't going to have Michael Myers. Moustapha Akkad was like, no, it has to have Michael Myers. So John Carpenter and Deborah Hill basically sold their shares to Moustapha Akkad, and then he was able to make his Halloween 4 with Michael Myers, even though if you saw the end of part 2, Michael Myers coming back really doesn't make any sense, but when does that ever stop a horror film? So, anyway, on to the plot. It's been 10 years later. We find out that Michael Myers is still alive. No worse for the wear, just some burn marks on his hands. Michael has not moved since the events of part 2, and he is once again being transferred to another sanitarium by ambulance. Of course, Michael wakes up, kills this ambulance staff after they talk conveniently enough about Michael's only living relative, since we find out Jamie Lee Curtis died off-screen in an auto accident. We then cut to Jamie Lee Curtis's character's daughter, Jamie, who is living with foster parents and her daughter Rachel. And we then cut again to Dr. Loomis, who is still alive also somehow, with some burn marks on his cheeks and hands, but is otherwise fine. Loomis finds out that Myers has disappeared and once again heads to Haddonfield to protect Jamie and her foster family. Michael chases Rachel and Jamie throughout Haddonfield streets on Halloween, on a rooftop, and in a grade school. At the school, a group of townspeople who basically are acting like a bunch of vigilantes catch them and pick them up, pick up Jamie and Rachel. Of course, Michael's hiding under the truck, of course. And he comes up through the truck, kills everyone but Jamie and Rachel. Rachel hits Michael with the truck. Loomis and the police arrive and shoot Michael, who falls down a mine shaft. I don't know if there's mine shafts in Illinois. Probably is. To his death, Jamie and Rachel are taken to home to be consoled. The foster mom goes upstairs to run Jamie a bath. Jamie then surprisingly kills her foster mom, and Loomis sees Jamie standing at the top of the stairs, looking very much like young Michael in the first one, as the credits roll. Okay, the good, the bad, and the weird for this one. The good, the ending. The ending was a complete shock when I first saw it. It was really great. They shot it really well. I can honestly say at the young age that I saw it, it was very surprising, very, very freaky. It was a bold move to take this 8-year-old who we've been kind of watching and invested in through the whole course of the movie and then make her do this violent act that she does at the end. The scene is helped by the performance of Danielle Harris, who was, I believe, 8 or 9 at the time. She really carries the movie. She's really, really good. There's a story that when they were shooting this movie in Utah, they were shooting her screaming down the streets, she was so realistic that the houses where she was in front of that weren't in the movie called the police, thinking some little girl was being terrorized by a crazed killer. So she did really, really good in that. The bad is the burn makeup. Just so I get this right, Loomis and Myers are literally at ground zero and an explosion in the hospital in the first one. And they not only both live, but they barely have any burns. And Loomis's makeup is on his cheek actually changes from scene to scene. Sometimes it's just like craggly. Sometimes there's this weird like mountain mound thing that comes and goes on his cheek. It's really bad. And in the sequels, which I've kind of remember, it changes and then completely disappears. I think I know for a fact it completely disappears in part 6, which is still 2 away. So it's just bad. I don't know why they went with the makeup they did. It just doesn't look very good. The weird, there's a scene in the beginning where we are introduced to Jamie, and she has a shoebox full of pictures, family pictures. One is a still photo of Jamie Lee Curtis from the first movie. It looks literally like they snapped a shot of her on set, which is weird because there's, usually there's pictures of, you with your mom and not just a stage photo, but whatever. And she also has a picture of Michael dressed up in his Halloween clown costume from the first one. And questions, where did they get this? Why would the Foster family have her keep this? I'm assuming these are passed down. Why did Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie character keep all these and just hand them down? Like, I guess this is the only brother, so maybe that's why. It just makes no sense. Yeah, it's just weird. I don't get it. To recommend or not recommend, I'm kind of on the edge on this one. I really like the fact that they try to go back to the original and focus more on atmosphere and not so much on gore. I mean, there still is gore in this, but compared to the time it was made, it's barely anything. It just feels of its time. It doesn't age as well as it should. Plus, I really hated the new mask. It's just so awful. I didn't like it. So I guess the tiebreaker would be, was I bored? Was I bored? And I wasn't. So I would probably recommend it. I have to say there wasn't too many problems. It's just the problems that were there. It's not enough to wreck this film. It's a fine B movie. I'll recommend it just if you're it's not expecting like a masterpiece like the original. And it's fine. It's well made for how much its budget was and its limitations. So if you like the first one, like the second one, just want to forget the third one, I would see this. It might be the last recommend I would give for quite a while because I do remember some of the sequels and they're not getting recommends. Well, that's it for this episode. If there is another one in some other class, the next one, I'll just keep on going, will be Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Thanks to everyone who was for listening to this podcast. I appreciate everything said. So just thanks to everyone. So I'll sign off, and until next time, happy Halloween.